And we're back. It's episode number 9 of the Brain Trust. I've got Jess. I got Tom with me. And Jess got a sweet gift from the WSOP that he's going to tell us about. We we went and played WSOP. We're going to break it down, talk about a bunch of things. And we also have to talk about what's going on in Canadian poker, where Tom is getting the business from his local casino. But first, Jess, tell us what you got as a sweet parting gift from the from Las Vegas.
Well, we're in Vegas. We're leaving, coming home. I'm like, hey, this was great. I left Vegas ahead. What a wonderful treat, And I get home, and then a couple days later, I feel terrible. I just feel awful. And turns out the parting gift was COVID. I got
Nice.
COVID from Vegas.
Lucky guy.
And yeah, it's just like, they say like nobody leaves Vegas ahead. Like it's, you don't really. And I think that was, yeah, I believe it.
Nice. That's nasty. Well, Tom, I want to ask you about Windsor, but first I want to take a little time and talk WSOP. So Jess, I want to ask you, like we spent, I guess you spent like a full 4 days there. I got a 5th day in, but what's your takeaway? You end up ahead. You're a sports betting savant, but now, like having played it, what are your thoughts? What did you think of the WSOP for the first time?
Gosh, I have a lot of different thoughts, I guess. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing that everybody comes together and like you can start. We got there at the very, very start, so it's just starting to pick up. And you could see that from like the day we came to the day we left, how movement was happening and how the rooms were like filling up. And, sorry, that's the dog. But you could just see this thing happening, and it was exciting in that level, and just being at the heart of it all. And then also, I mean, I had some reflections because, like, I mean, I saw like, it's like me being at the WSOP and how I navigate it, and then Sean being WSOP and how he navigates it, and it brought up some like it gave me some really good reflections, as well that I can go into.
Yeah, I want to hear it. I've never been like that gassed. First of all, I've never been there day one. That was interesting. Like the footage from I think on the episode of day 5 when I went down after you smash your Coors Light, Bud Light.
Coors Light
Smashes it. Good on you. Appreciate that. Smashes a Coors Light with a pancake to start the day, or a crepe to start the day, and then off to the plane. Well, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go down to the Paris. It's right here. That way I don't have to leave the hotel and we'll play. I go in there. There are 2 games running, and I've never seen that room that empty. Like they had a, was it 10-20 mix game or 20-40 mix game, and they had 5-card PLO. That's all that was running in that entire room. And it was like 10 a.m. So normally when you walk in there's like a few of every game. It's not crowded, but it's going. I've never walked into such an empty room. So that was weird. That was an experience. But yeah, so I want to hear. So give me one of your thoughts here, because you said you have a lot of reflections from it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, okay, so like kind of the big thing that I walked away with was like, I'm there, we're there every day, we can play every day. And I just thought, man, how hard, difficult, and sometimes miserable it would be to be a professional poker player. Like, how, so I'm so glad to get the chance to like go there and see it. But like, I mean, the things that I thought of, and I made notes. I have notes here.
At what point were you in the trip where you like, dude, this would be miserable? Like, how long did it take you to reach that point?
I mean, I think I was only when I left. I think when I left and I kind of like calibrated it all.
Okay.
I wasn't like thinking, and also like, of course, like my disposition and like my temperaments are like very different than yours. Like,
sure.
I think
Sure.
You know, like I would have a much harder time than you would. But I thought like just the main things that were like that stood out to me is like you know, like I'm in social work and counseling, and like, you know, we take this like we take like a with our patients and clients, and you know, we take a based perspective. So you know, we kind of focus more on what people are doing well, you know, when they're having difficulties. And you know, when we're playing poker, we're always looking for a good game. You
Yeah.
know, we're always looking for like players that are, you know, weaker, you know, than us, and like, you know, so we have like a weak, you know, weak focused, you know, mentality on the world, which I think would wear on me, you know, after a while. And then,
So
you know, just
are you saying like being the lion and looking into the herd and trying to find the wildebeest with the broken leg, you just couldn't live your life like that?
right, yeah. I think like, you know, on our end, it's like we're, you know, the injured wildebeest, you know, we're trying to like heal it and get it up to going and running, and to be in the lion shoes, you know, and like just do that forever. Uh Man, like I think that would just be like, yeah, for me it probably just wouldn't, it just, yeah, it'd be tough. And then the unsteadiness of the income, you know,
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah.
just gonna be, you know, like it's really like, you know, like in a trip, you can have these ups and downs and leave ahead and like, you know, do great hourly and everything, but it's like you got to ride these things. And so,
Yeah.
and you know, even some months where you lose money, I mean, just kind of it's unfathomable to like that, and that impact on your mental well-being, you know, not
Yeah.
knowing like, hey, and then relying on, you know, just yeah, you don't have any like, it's not like you can take sick leave or something, and you know, you have to rely on your skills every single day
Oh,
and
for
your
sure.
mindset. And then I think the other thing is like just like what what others are doing for fun. Like we went there, we had fun. You know, if I had lost all the money I brought, or if I had won money, either way, I would have been like, "Oh man, that sucks," or "Oh, that was good." But I had an experience, and I just move on. It doesn't affect my life.
Yeah.
But so what other people do for fun and a good time, you're doing to like pay your mortgage and like do this,
Yeah.
and so it's just this heaviness that goes with it. And like, I think I would rather be those people, you know, that go and sometimes they win and sometimes they lose and sometimes they make you make the pros upset, you know, because they just cooled you or whatever. But like, I would much rather be on that side than like the and then I think just the meaning, you know, going to the casino every day, like sitting, I think I would have trouble day in day. I mean, I think after a month, I would be like, oh man, like what are we doing here? So, anyways, that's kind of how it hit me. Is that it's a really hard profession, and I have a lot of respect for the people that do it.
So this is why you've come to a balance in your life where you're doing social work a few days a week and then you play poker once a week. Is that your net balance is that you're helping more wildebeest than you're killing off as a lion, right?
Yeah,
Is that the
I
idea?
have the nature in me to kill some wildebeest. I mean, it's true. Like I have that nature, right? And
Right.
so we have to feed that nature, but it's not
Right.
all or nothing, right? So I need to be in balance. So
And the good news is that on being on that side, you get to like know which wildebeests are sickly before they ever show up to the room. This is like you're getting some inside information. You're like, I know which ones I'm going to pick off when I get the chance.
I mean, so it was. I mean, I think when I came home, I was so excited for my week. Honestly, like I mean, of course,
Cool.
I missed the whole week of work, whatever.
Yeah.
But I was like, hey, this is going to be great. I have a short 3 day work week. I'm going to play poker on Friday. It's going to be a lovely time. You know, maybe the three of us will get together at the end of the week. What more do I want? Like it's the balance was perfect. So I think yes, you're absolutely right. Like I think having the balance and not just like jumping all into one or the other,
Yeah.
and I had fun. So yeah, so I guess I just had appreciation for kind of where I am. But yeah, what are your thoughts, Sean?
Oh man, I have a ton of thoughts. I'd say first of all, I've never spent less time. So I remember before I ever started like vlogging or any of that, I remember watching people walking around with like a selfie stick and a camera and thinking, those people just like they aren't present. You're not appreciating this moment. You're capturing it, but you're not like in it. You know what I mean? Because your plan is to capture it and then go back and review it, and you're not actually like just being present and enjoying the moment because you're trying to take it in. I thought I could never live like that. I don't know how people do this. That just looks like you're pushing through life even faster than you should, and you don't get to take anything in. And then this time, because of my buddy Jerry, who did this last year and was there day one and putting out the vlogs and cranking them out, and it was great for his channel and all this stuff, I thought, okay, I'm gonna give it a try. I'm gonna go with it. And so I'm there, like, and I felt terrible, but I would like play, and then I'd be like, okay, Jess, you're grabbing a workout. I went down with you day one, get a little bit of a workout, run back to the room, and I'm editing, trying to get this thing ready, crank out the episode. And I spend so much time doing that I'm not hanging with you. I'm not playing cards. I'm not doing any of that. And then now it's time to go back to the tables, film some more, and then do it all over again. And I got home and I'm like, I don't think I've ever enjoyed a trip less. Like spending time with you was great. The time I enjoyed the most was when we sat at that 1-3 table and hung out, and we met Pierre and Amit and all that. Like that was a great game. And I thought, I wish I had just done that the whole time, regardless of, it was just such a grind that I feel like I didn't take much in, and I wish I had taken more.
And it wasn't even a guarantee that we were going to do that on the trip. So I'm glad that worked out. And I mean, my perspective was like, it did feel like, I mean, especially on your end, it did feel like work. I mean, you were working. You were like,
it was
you have this plan for the day and this agenda, and like, you want to get the editing done and post a video, and then you're, dealing with that, and then, playing at the tables and then processing what's happening and debriefing the hands and everything, and then getting ready for the next day and putting to me, it seemed like a large number of hours, so like, it was like kind of go. So it did feel like, I mean, I get, maybe that's why when I left, I was like, yeah, it feels like anything you do all day feels like work,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I want to hear, okay, so tell me about 2-5, because you were nervous coming in about 2-5. Then you sat at the table, you played this game. Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, I played at, so the first couple of days I played at Bellagio, and the last day we played at Aria. And I mean, first off, like, I mean, they're lovely rooms. So
yeah, for sure.
I mean, I liked the experience of it. And it was like, they were all packed. I mean, I feel like we had to wait to get in. So they were busy. But yeah, to the question, like, I was, so it was a bigger, usually I play 1-2 for a $300 buy-in, and this was 2-5 for $500 buy-in. And I was, I didn't know what to expect. And, and there was some people that were like locals and they're from Vegas, and they're talking about how like they're looking forward to the tourists coming and all that.
Yeah.
But they also were, not great players either, so like that was like, there wasn't like, sharks in the water or something like maybe people fear. But it really depends on the table too, because the first day was like, man, it was a great table. I mean, if it's in Austin, it's a great table. If it's in Vegas, it's a great table. It's a great table wherever.
Yeah.
And the second day was like, I could definitely tell there were players that were like more serious, and even like how they played, like they would take the same amount of time for each move, and they were very, very deliberate. And the level of play went up. I think on the second day, there's the table I happened to be at. So and there's still some, like, of course, like just recreational players. But so I didn't. Anyways, it felt like I guess it did feel like the first day was like kind of 1-2, and then the second day felt kind of like more like 2-5, and
Sure.
but I didn't feel uncomfortable. So yeah, it was a good experience.
I was impressed. Tom, you had a ton of good advice, and Jess was like really in tune with, hey, I know Tom has great experience in how to think well. And you were passing on to Jess, like, eat well, eat fish, sleep well, all that stuff. And it was good. It was the most time I've ever spent. It was the highest number of meals I've ever had that were really high quality. Like, we were down every morning in that Cafe Americano having like the salmon bowl. There was like salmon. What was it? salmon, all these veggies,
It's
like
all veggies. It was
avocado.
low carbs.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
And
really cafe americano, man. I mean, if
yeah,
you want like healthy food at the WSOP, that's where to go. Yeah, Tom, you gave some great advice, man. I mean, I think
yeah.
like, I mean, the thing that before the trip, I had punted, I played like a 6 hour session and I punted like some money back the last hour or two. And I realized like, you think of things as solid, like your thinking is always this way. Like I think like this as a poker player, but actually
Right.
your thinking quality varies, it depends. Like it's
Sure.
middle of the night or whatever. And like if you're tired, and so I noticed it was going like that. So then I consulted Tom before this trip. I'm like, man, what should I do? And what did you tell me, Tom?
Drink plenty of fluids, mostly water. Try to maintain a reasonable sleep schedule, right? Try to do, don't be eating big meals, in the middle of doing stuff. Make sure you get proper exercise. All sorts of stuff like that.
I was talking to Jess while we were there. I used to play a different card game. We go play these tournaments, and there was this guy who seemed like a complete weirdo. He would finish his round and he would run to the back of the room and he'd be doing push-ups and jumping jacks and all this stuff. And I remember people kind of laughing at him at the beginning of the tournament, and then by the end, when he had outlasted everybody and was winning, it was like maybe he's on to something. And so that was good advice as well that you had. So
I mean, so Tom, one of the things you said, I was doing, and I want to do is like, hey, like every hour or two, like take a break and do something cardio related to kind of get the blood flow moving and your brain thinking. And but what I noticed is like at the casino, like there's not like a spot where you can just do jumping jacks or just do push-ups. Like, I mean, there's no one doing that anywhere. And it would be like, I think security would come to me, like it would just be so weird. I would be on the camera and I'd feel like, so that was a conundrum that I was like, didn't know how to work around that. So what I ended up doing was, there are these huge like, walkways and shopping outlets and whatever, like, in the walkways and all these fancy stores. And so I just did speed walking for like 5 minutes. I would just like kind of speed walk back and forth. And that didn't seem to bring any attention or anything. So, but I think because I was really anxious, like, I'm in a different environment and everything and a different stake. And I don't, it's also 8-handed. I mean, that's a difference than here in Austin where it's 9-handed, and just these little things. And so I think my anxiety was a little bit higher. So I think it was more important for me to like take breaks and exercise to like, come back. Yeah.
I think you just came up with a great idea for poker rooms though, Jess. Like what if you said there's no designated place for it? What if poker rooms, you need to write on a suggestion card to the poker rooms.
Punching bag.
I'd like to see like an old phone booth that's set up. You go inside, the doors close, it's all blacked out so people can't see you. But the moment you get in there, like 80s pop music starts going, the lights go, and then you're in there like jazzercising with a video, and you can like have a private jazzercise session for 5 minutes in between hands. That's the suggestion you need to run by.
Yeah.
Like, excuse me, gentlemen, I'll be right back. And then they could just faintly hear.
Yeah. I mean, it felt like a very healthy trip, like we're eating well. You have to walk a ton in Vegas, to go to the different card rooms and all of that. And like, I mean, it can be, and you're thinking, and it was like I thought it was a good trip. I enjoyed it. And,
Just
I can't imagine.
Give us one takeaway that, like, if somebody was watching this and they've never been, since you've now been, what's the one thing that you would throw and say, like, hey, here's my 2 cents, or here's the thing you need to know?
Well, I think getting a hotel room, that's kind of where we were, like right in the middle of the strip and where everything is, so you can just walk. And then like I would say, I'm glad we did on the last day, but like just being able to see all the different card rooms, because they all have a little bit of a different culture and a feel, and that's fun. and you know, also like there's
Well, really quick, which room did you like the best? You said of all the ones you tried.
You know, it's funny because like I like the style of Bellagio, but on the exterior to the outside tables, you know, there is this smoke residue that comes in that you know you get, which like in Texas, like at least in Austin, like people don't smoke in the poker room, so you don't have that. So I noticed that. But I think the Aria was like a little bit further removed from like the casino floor. And the poker room was like expanded, but when it isn't expanded, I would imagine I'd like the Aria. And honestly, like the 1-3 and 2-5, the caps were 500 either way. So I don't think it made any like discernible difference. Like, you know, I would play at the Aria, I think, just because I think the setup was, oh, and the food was great. The Aria, gosh, I mean, you know, that money line you mentioned in one of your videos, and then I had that, and then I had Lemongrass, which is like a Thai place, which was like everybody said was amazing, and it was. So I mean, I just had really good, and the Aria is beautiful. Like it's just a lovely place. So I think that was probably I think I like that. I like that the most.
Nice. I think that's great advice. That's one of my favorite rooms for sure. Definitely one you got to check out while you're there. All right, I'm gonna shift gears off WSOP unless you have any final thoughts there.
What was your what room did you enjoy the most this trip?
This trip, Aria by far, but just because I could play PLO. Dude, I had so much fun playing PLO. I just felt like a kid in a candy store. It was, I don't know. I that game has been like, when I first started learning Hold'em, it just had this like grasp, this grip on me, whatever, where I was like, man, I can't wait to get back to the card room. I can't wait. And I still love it, still want to get back there, but it doesn't have that kind of pull. And PLO now has that kind of pull. So being back and feeling that like, oh, it's so fun to be I just want more hands. I got to see, you know, it's such a fun feeling, and it's really rewarding. Not that I've made such great progress, but I can go back and watch the first video I ever put out, and I'm like ashamed of how I played PLO. And I can sit at the table now and be like, no, I'm not good at this, but I'm so much farther along than I was 3 months ago. You know, I can recognize some equities and where I'm at and what I'm looking for and not make huge mistakes pre-flop. And so anyway.
Definitely, yeah.
All right, Tom, we got to
hang on one second.
Yeah,
just segue to the PLO. Two things. Changes growth. So if you're just doing the same thing that you did last year, then you can't possibly be improving. So unless you are perfect, right? Unless you're already the perfect PLO player, then at least you have a chance to head in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I'd like to say is we had a guest here a couple of guests ago, Professor PLO.
Yeah, PLO professor. Yeah.
PLO professor, sorry. And I checked out his channel. You know, like he has a 20 part series. Anyway, I'm like maybe 2/3 of the way through. I will say, like, if anybody out there is interested in PLO, like I'm a complete idiot and I could follow what he was saying. So, really, really good.
Yeah,
really,
I
really
agree.
Good.
I ran into Josh while we were down there, and I should have filmed something with him. I didn't. We started chatting for a little bit, but he's like gearing up to get into this giant mixed game, and he's he's ready to play at such a high level. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go find some 1-2 PLO at the Aria. But it's cool. He's a good dude. All right, we got to go to Windsor. We got to talk about what's happening because doesn't feel okay to me. Tom, tell us what's going on.
Okay, so I guess in most casinos it's no flop, no drop.
Yep.
But at my local casino, they decided that they don't like that idea. So basically, the rake is 10% up to a maximum of $8 at 1-2. 10% maximum $8 plus $1 for the bad beat jackpot, which at the moment it's like about $70,000. And it's even if there's no flop, they take the 10%.
Wow.
Do you think you can realistically still beat that game?
Well, okay. They introduced it. I didn't realize it, but they introduced it at the beginning of the year. So far, I'm up at like about, I can tell you exactly, actually. I played for 46 hours and I'm up $341. So that works out to about $7 an hour.
Yeah, so you're beating it, but they're just absolutely
not by
killing
much.
you. Yeah, they're killing you. Yeah. That's insane. Taking it pre-flop is nuts because that's so much money that you can be stealing from players without a rake normally. And it makes a huge difference in your bottom line. So for you to have to pay the rake pre-flop that's nasty. And like I've heard of ones that are like, hey, there's a $1 rake no matter what. So that so that people don't just try to like chop and win a bonus hand or something like that. I've never heard of 10% pre-flop. That's crazy. So
wow.
I'm actually really impressed that you are beating that game at all because that's really bad. That's really bad.
Yeah. I mean, what? So at Vegas, it was it like 5% up to about the 2-5 game or 1-3 game? Was it like you had to go to a flop and then it was like 5% up to $5 at that stake?
10% up to 5, yeah.
10% up to $5.
Yeah, but a $5 cap at the Aria was, I mean, that's nothing.
Yeah, and then that's nothing. And then okay, so we're talking about 10% up to $8 and then an extra $1.
And in the 2-5 game, it's $1 more. So I'm thinking I might have to try to get to the 2-5 game ASAP to try to make it at least a little bit better.
And Jess and I were talking, man, like your skill level, the way you're thinking about poker, I don't see any reason why you would be hesitant to play that 2-5 game and not do well at it unless you know that they're all crushers and pros and stuff. But if that's not the case, I mean, I feel like you'll do great in that game. So are you concerned about moving up? I mean, do you recognize a lot of people and you're like, hey, these are folks.
Some of the people that play in the 1-2 game play in the 2-5 game.
Yeah.
I mean, I recognize some of the players that I play at the tables do seem like they're better than me. But of course, I always have sort of like in poker, because you don't always get to see the hands, and you also don't necessarily know player A may have some insight into player B's play that I just don't have because I haven't played player B before or haven't played him much.
Yeah.
So like, for example, there was this one hand earlier today where a guy made some big raise and the guy called and then they showed the guy that called showed his hand and I'm like, in 1,000 years I wouldn't call with this hand. Like
and this was at the 2-5 table?
This was at a 1-2 table, but it was two guys who do play 2-5 sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So that they may have insight into each other's play that I just don't have.
Sure.
Because I played one guy a few times and I played the other guy like twice. So anyway.
I'm really curious because have you ever played that game? You haven't, right?
No, never played 2-5, never.
I'm really curious. I think you'll do well in it, and I want to hear how that goes for you because I think you'll not only beat it, but I think you'll be surprised at how similar it is. Mm-hmm. Does that seem reasonable, Jess, to say?
Yeah, I think it's always easier for us, like people outside of yourself to say, but like for us, it's like, yeah, we wouldn't be worried, like, I think we think you do really well there. And then, yeah, I mean, and if you're just, and the way you play, I don't think the risk is there as much,
I would say the only thing that maybe you'll have to think about over time is whether or not people are going after you. Because I know that you're more risk averse. I'd say you have a higher fold tendency than most, which is
for sure.
Which is something that if they catch on to, they will try to take. Like I know that if you and I were playing, I would be aware of that and would take advantage of those spots. But also, I mean, once they learn your game, you also get to push back and exploit them by being like, "Yep, I'm going for a check raise," and they're gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, he always has it." Like they'll always give you credit, and so I think you'll get away with that a ton. So
I think even the players, like thinking about the Vegas trip and like even the players that, when we were sitting deeper and they're not great players, but even then they're play. I feel like you can play more. They're playing more speculative hands and drawing hands and hands you can't
Yeah.
really see. Like when the river card comes, and they still lose money, like a lot of those poor players. But then there's there it's not as much of a horrible play as it is when you're playing like 1-2 short stacked and you're chasing. They're doing better at the deeper stack game because
Right.
like they don't get punished as much and they can be a little bit more bluffy and so it's an interesting. But I think your skill set will just like I think you'll catch on pretty quickly. But it's terrible. I mean that's so at your casino it's sort of like I mean that's kind of what the casino is there for, right? I mean casino's not there to like make other people rich or to make them
No.
wealthy or give them jobs for themselves outside of it. They're
Right.
trying to bring money in, and so
Sure.
Yeah.
if they can get a little bit of an extra edge on any of their table games, including poker, like why not? So I mean it's that's the challenge. I know like Doug Polk has spoken of like, hey, that's the dream of poker. We don't want to take that away from people. Like we want to give them like a rake that's reasonable.
Right.
But it sounds like over there they just are thinking about the bottom line.
Well, I
And
was talking with a guy from Australia while I was at the Aria playing PLO that last day, and he was saying that after COVID, they came in and they've got all these this gross inbreeding where they've got the government and the casinos are kind of in bed together, and so the
Same in
government's
Canada. Same in Canada.
I figured it was the case if
Yeah.
they're doing this because
Mhm.
then it's hard to have competition, right? But
Mhm.
basically, the government's like, hey, we're only going to give out so many gaming licenses, and the casino's like, hey, we know you're only going to give so many out. We're going to scratch your back, you scratch ours. And then so what's happened is that they raised the rake in Australia, according to this guy, at his local place up to $25 per hand, 10% up to $25. He's like, no one's beating the game,
Right.
but so it's killed the game. And now it's all just like guys who are willing to gamble. They're all losing. They don't care. And now they're playing home games to try to figure out how to have a reasonable game. Because it's their only option. Like they're just getting smashed. So I'm curious to see maybe if there's like a home game movement, or because you don't have enough competition to just be like, oh, I'll just go down the street, right?
Right.
Yeah.
At least here, the only option would be to go across the border to Detroit, which is not. I mean, it's not that bad,
right.
But it's it's another country.
Right. Well, and you could get hung up at the border, and it could end up taking a ton of time, and that's a big deal for your day if you don't want to do that. So, Well, I'm curious if you guys have any hands off the top of your head. If not, I really want to ask you about the quad kings hand I played.
Oh, let's hear the hand.
Do you get okay? So if you didn't see it, so I'm playing PLO. I open from early position with a medium king. So I have King of Hearts, Jack of Hearts, 9 of Hearts, King of Clubs, something like that. Right. And I end up raising. I get. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 callers. We go to the flop, and the flop is King 9 with 2 diamonds. So I have quads. Now in this game, there's definitely people who could be chasing. Here's my thought process. I'm like, if they have a boat, we're getting all the money in, right? If he's got 9s, he's going to bet. He's going to continue betting. We're going to get the money in. If he doesn't have a boat, I need him to try to catch up somehow. And there's a flush available. Mm-hmm. My thought process is if I check this, allow him to try to catch something and allow some of his bluffs to stay in. That's probably the most profitable way to play this. So I check to him. It goes check, and a guy bets. So now I've got a some money going in, and the guy to my left has been calling with just top pair or maybe a weak 2 pair and stuff. And I'm like, so if he has a 9, he's probably coming along. So for that reason, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to raise here. I'm just going to call, and then I'll plan to raise the turn. Well, the turn's the Jack of diamonds. So I'm like, great. I have quads. Now there's a flush there. He could have a full house with the jacks. So I check it over
hang on
again.
Just one second, though. Your hand was King, Jack 9, and the board is King, Jack 9?
I know.
So you're blocking almost everything anybody could have.
I know.
Okay.
But the diamonds, that's what I'm saying. So the diamonds have come in, and I'm thinking he should probably have diamonds a fair amount, right? So I check, and this time it checks through. But Do you change anything when the diamond comes in? Like, do you now take the betting lead? Do you end up check raising the flop, hoping he has a diamond draw and get sticky? Because the check raise is often going to be like, either I have the king or I have the boat, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I hold a 9. So like if it's really hard for him when I check raise him, if he doesn't have a full house, for him to like hold on, because he's like, even if I hit, I might not be good.
It's so bad you have a jack and a 9.
I know. I agree.
So
I agree.
bad.
So I check it over. He checks back on the turn. And I thought, is there ever a donk lead there? Like, do I ever just take the betting lead and go for it, even though he had the lead on the flop? You know, it's possible.
I wonder if you could donk lead like super small.
Oh, interesting. On the flush, and hope he has a bigger flush and goes for the raise.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is like, I played this hand and I sat back and I'm like, I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm not happy with the result, like for hitting quads and getting so little. Because I think I made, the pot was like $400 in the end. Because
I don't think I'd raise on the flop because you block
so much, right?
Everything, right?
Yeah. But I didn't really think too much about putting a small bet out there on the turn to see if I could get it raised. I like that. I like that thought a lot.
It makes it look like you're trying to figure out where you're at.
Sure.
Right. I want to know where I'm at with quads.
Right. Like, so if you had like say like the queen high flush there, and you put out like a small blocker bet, and he happens to hold the ace high flush, which makes sense based on what he did on the flop. Maybe you can get him to like go for it, right?
Right.
So what do you bet? You bet like a quarter of the pot? How small do you go?
Yeah, a quarter pot, something like that.
Okay.
And so if they fold, they didn't have. I mean, they can't call a quarter pot bet. They didn't have anything, and they're probably never going to have anything.
I like that a lot, because even if they do call, then you can kind of polarize on the river and hope that they'll make the call and be like, I don't know about this guy.
Right.
Yeah, I like that plan. But even I really like the idea of like putting the quarter pot size out there on the turn, because it looks really strange, like a blocker bet, which people have been trained. If you get the blocker bet, it's a blocker bet. Go for the raise.
Right.
So yeah, I like that move.
Well, and just so many times, right? You see people size the bets. There's this one channel, Hungry Horse Poker, and the guy talks about how a lot of people telegraph the strength of their hand through the size of their bet.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
So they got a really good hand. They bet really big to hope to extract as much value as possible, right? They got kind of a marginal hand. They kind of bet, it's like, my hand might be good. I'm going to do a Bart Hansen thin value bet, but
yes,
it doesn't look too like convincing, right?
Right.
So this way you kind of flip it on its head.
Okay, this is another thing I want to talk to you guys about, because I played with this just a little bit on the trip, and I've done it before. But if I know a guy is like a Crush Live Poker subscriber, and he goes for that thin value bet on the river,
raise them.
You raise them, and they don't call, because they know don't call the raise.
They got the information.
Right.
You told me, right? I wanted to see where I was.
Yeah.
You told me where I was. Like, well, okay.
I had a conversation with a guy who was like, oh yeah, I've really been enjoying Crush Live Poker and and it's really helped my game. And I was like, okay, let me put that away for later. And then it wasn't a huge spot. It was a pot that was so small that I didn't even end up making the vlog. But I was like, all right, this is the spot. He went for like a third of the pot on the river, and I'm like, yep, done. Like, let's go. So went for the raise, and he snap folded, and I was like, okay, perfect. But I think as the game shifts more that way, when you recognize that like that style of play, I think you can take advantage of it. So kind of fun that they're trying to exploit you by being willing to bet and fold, and then you can go to the next level and play.
Right.
Because
yeah. I mean, Tom, I caught that you were mentioning this, and I caught Jonathan Little saying it this week about, he's like, and I watched it just to make sure to hear how he said it, but he's like, hey, on the river, when you're in position and it comes to you, if you're going to reopen the betting line, to them, you have to bet at least half pot, because then the risk the risk of reopening the whole betting sequence to the other players is so high that if you're just trying to squeeze like 20% or 10% or 30% of the pot, it's not worth it.
Right.
It's just not worth it. So
I will say that with a caveat. Oh, sorry. Did you have more, Jess? I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought you were done. I will say with the caveat, though, there are players that you can exactly where they're at in the hand. Like, their range is capped and they're not capable of check raising you on the river.
Mm-hmm.
I will go 20%. Like, you're like, okay, I know that they have like third pair here based on how this is run out. They're never calling a real size bet and they're never check raising me. Yeah. And I'll put out that just like tiny little like, oh, here's just, you won't miss these chips. And they will. They'll call. I'm trying to remember who it was that I don't remember if it was Fitzgerald or a different author, but they were talking about, you'll notice like some of the key guys in a room that are beating the game are able to identify those spots where they should bet as small as 10% of the pot to get called, and they will get called. Like that's like one of those things that separates people. And I'm not the best at it, right? But I've definitely found those spots after reading that book. But he was talking about, he's like, there's guys that are just experts at being like, he has fourth pair. I bet I can get a 10%. And they'll put 10% out there, never getting raised, getting called, and just pulling in chips, and they can have like two pair, but they're just good enough at identifying, I'll never get called for this size. I will get called for this size. And they get to kind of play with their opponents in that way. So I really like those thoughts.
And like and it's just so important, I think, on the river to make some money. I mean, that's where the pot is so much bigger than when you started, and that's where you're going to really see some of your profits. So it makes sense.
Yeah. And I would say, like, for the most part, I will tend to choose larger sizings in general, because you'll be amazed at what you can get a crying call from, where they're like, oh, I had top pair on the flop. It's now like nowhere near the nuts, but does he really have they'll convince themselves like, I'm going to bluff catch and look like a genius. So they're calling like an 80% pot bet with third pair because they're like, aha, trying to put you in your place just to find out that you have top set or whatever. But anyway. All right. Well, I wanted to ask you guys too. We were talking about tournaments just a little bit. I just wanted to dabble in that because we were there, played one tournament, should have played more, but just time-wise didn't have a ton of time. And I left, I finished 110 out of like 480 or something, and they paid top 64, so I could like see the money. I could see I was getting close, nines versus tens, and I lose, jam, and I get a few more all-ins, and I end up not making it. But I ended up putting most of a day into that, probably like 7 hours or something into that tournament. Maybe not 7 hours. Let's see, 6.5, something like that. And I remember just walking away from it being like, I don't feel like I did anything like extremely wrong, but I'm down 250. I have nothing to show for it. And I could have been making money at a table this whole time. Yeah. And not that the tournaments aren't worth it, because when you get a big score, then you feel like a genius and you're like, yeah, this is the best way I could have spent 8 hours. But what do you guys think of, like, would you ever be able to put cash totally to the sideline and just play tournaments?
I mean, I'll see if I can pull it up, but this week I was on, I had COVID, so I had some free time. So I was, our previous guest, Poker Face Ash, I was watching one of her videos, and she shared her app, where she tracks her losses and her wins, and she's had like an amazing year, right? Like really profitable year. But so anyway, I don't remember exactly when this video came out, but she showed it, and it was just like, and she wasn't saying she was running bad or anything was out of the ordinary. She was like, oh yeah, this is what's happening, and it was like, it was all tournaments. It was all multi-table tournaments. And it was just like minus. And it's like for like the whole page, like I mean, it was just, I was like, wow, how can she do that? Like she's doing it, and she's just like very, but and then that video, she was going to the cash game. She's like, okay, like, let's turn this around. And I mean, putting so much time Like I remember that day, you spent a lot of time in that tournament, and it was very exciting to, on my
Oh, it
end, to
was.
see you like, you're hanging in there and everything. I was like, oh man, let's see what happens. But yeah, that same amount of time, if you were playing like, a cash game, when you leave after that many hours and you leave with nothing, it's just like, I just, I mean, there was definitely a rush just on my side, hoping that things go well for you that
Yeah.
you don't get with a cash game. Like, I'm
Oh,
like
for sure.
on the edge. Like, I'm like, oh man, you should have a picture of your chips. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. Let's go. And it could be like a huge win.
Yeah.
So there's a different edge, but man, Tom, what do you think?
Let's supposing I were to offer you a job, and the job pays you twice what you make now, but you're going to get all of your money. Instead of getting cash, you're going to get Powerball tickets. So let's say you're making like $80,000 a year, but instead you get $160,000 worth of Powerball tickets. Would you take that job?
No, never. No.
Okay. Well, I kind of think playing tournaments is kind of like getting paid in Powerball tickets. Right? You could make
way to look
millions
at it.
of dollars.
Right.
If you're willing to take the risk.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to win the Powerball, right?
Yeah.
Forget about like winning the billion or whatever, but somebody's going to win $10 million. Their life's going to be changed.
Yeah.
Somebody should take that, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not going to be me. No chance. No chance. Now I could certainly see like, somebody like at our casino, they have a lot of really small tournaments, but in my opinion, like the rakes is just way too high.
What is rake there? Do you know?
There's one that I think is like 245, and I think 45 of it is part of the entry fee.
Oh wow, yeah, okay.
It's like I don't know how many
20%,
people.
Yeah.
Like even the best tournament players in the room, are they really going to make very much money? Like even if your ROI was like plus 40%,
sure,
right? You're barely making anything on average, and you're taking this huge variance to make a little bit of money when you could just go to the cash game. I mean, if you're good. Now, the only thing I think that could be an argument in favor of playing tournaments is maybe like the bottom 20% of tournament players are maybe worse than the bottom 20% of cash players.
Yeah, right? I did notice, like, because people have talked about, World Series of Poker events being soft. And I was like, okay, I've played, usually when I go down there, I'll play the other ones because the rake is lower, right? If you play a Venetian event or if you play something at the Win or whatever, their series tends to pay out better and have a lower rake. And so I've always played those.
Right.
But the level of competition was definitely lower at that WSOP event than I expected. Like I couldn't believe some of the things I was seeing. There was a guy who he limps in pre-flop, gets jammed on, and then sits there and debates. Like, and this is not like, we're not talking a shallow stack. He's probably sitting on, this is like 40 bigs or something. And he puts in like one big blind and then is debating calling. And then eventually he's like, all right, I'll fold. And he has like queen jack offsuit. You're like, what are you thinking? You're going to limp call a jam with queen jack off? But that was a real decision for him. And he made, later on, I think he made the call with deuces. Like did a very similar thing. It was for fewer big blinds, but he did it with, I mean, it was just wild stuff where you're like, okay, I don't know what I'm watching right now, but it's pretty a lot less competitive than I expected. Of course, once you got up there, like once I got to that like 150-ish players left, you started to be like, okay, it's tightening up. Things are, you can tell who you're targeting, but the targets are shrinking a lot, so.
I could believe like the best cash game players in the world, the best tournament players in the world, like, like in their respective fields are going to be like the best of the best, right? They're going to be the most studied people who, have the most refined strategies, spent the most time, learned in the most efficient way, etc. So there's not like saying that people playing tournaments are stupid or whatever. I'm just saying the nature of tournaments is such that like if you're kind of bad, you're not going to get to play much. Right?
True.
So,
and even if you're really good, to your point, the variance is still incredibly high.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine that being my main source of income.
Yeah, me neither.
This was
mentally. Oh, go ahead, Jess.
Well, yeah, mentally. This is the snapshot from that video, and it's like, imagine, and she had an incredible year. So imagine this is your month. This is your month. This is what you do, and this is your month. And it's like mostly all MTTs, and it's
Okay.
like, I mean, if you can see.
Yeah, so it's just like a line
bunch
down,
of-
a bump
yeah.
up, and then a line down again.
Yeah, and it's just
Yeah.
like, well, you know, like for a
Yeah.
month, it's just like you're buying into tournaments and you're losing, and that's to be expected, you know. I mean, it's just
Right.
it's incredible mental fortitude, like
Yeah.
incredible,
Yeah.
you know, just knowing like, yeah, it's like, yeah, like I'm gonna buy into 100 tournaments and I hope 5 go really well, you know, like
Yeah. Yeah.
But think of how long the long run is, right? People who play online tournaments, like
Yeah.
in a day, okay, I don't pretend to know how many tournaments, like say a Crusher online is going to play, but in a day, I mean, I assume a dozen would not be like that amazing, right? And if they do
Sure.
that every day, right, for an entire year, you're playing like 4,000 tournaments in a year, let's
Sure.
say. Okay, live, how long would it take you to play 4,000 tournaments?
you couldn't in a year.
Yeah.
Well, no,
Yeah.
you couldn't do it in a decade. Like you'd have to play more than one tournament per day. How are you going to do that? Like online, you could play 6 at once or whatever, right?
Sure.
But so, um, like, I mean, that's also the other problem, right? Like the long run is probably pretty long. Like it could be decades. Like
Well,
really could.
And I just think, like, mentally for me, I mean, I don't know. I've never tried to live in a, you know, if you're watching this right now and you play a bunch of tournaments, tell me in the comments how many you play in a year. Because I would play, like, if I had them locally and I could play them, I would probably play like one a month or something. Like if it was a good tournament, I'd probably fire one a month just for fun. And because when you do hit it, it's like it's kind of this fun journey while you're going along. And like Jess said, I sent him that photo and I'm like, hey, I got double the average stack right now, feeling great, having fun, and like kind of that adrenaline, that competitive, way more than a cash game. But to have to consistently go in and lose, knowing that eventually that payoff is coming versus just regularly getting a payoff, like say even 55% of the time that you go in, you get a payoff and some money in your wallet versus like one out of every however many, 10 that you play. And then you hope it's a big enough payoff that it actually puts you ahead.
Right.
Like the grind, man, the mental fortitude that takes to just go in there day after day and be like, okay, I hope that I can put some cash in my wallet. I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could make that a regular mix and just be okay with it. It would be so hard.
Like, in our Vegas trip, like, I don't know, man. The way it is for me is like, I think that how I perceive is like when you go and you're gonna go play, okay, great, I'm gonna go play. When I go to play, I'm like, all right, okay, I'm gonna focus on these things, and I'm like, it's like I think I have this anxious energy before I get to the table every single time, and the anxiety is like, I know that no matter how much I studied or whatever, I know coolers happen, car wrecks happen, weird, bizarre things happen, and I can leave, down 2 buy-ins, or I can just, like I'm only, like I know these things can happen on any given day. And that's hard for me, like as a cash game player, like it's hard for me to kind of like, okay, I'm still gonna come because in the long term, it's fine. I have to like remind myself of that. Whereas like in tournaments, I mean, someone with my, like my fortitude or whatever, just like, oh no, like, because, you're just exposed to because in tournaments, there's just so many car crashes, and that's kind of what it is, So it's just,
well, and how do you, like, I feel like when you're playing cash, if you're looking down at your win rate, you can build a win rate pretty quickly. And excuse me. And maybe you don't, maybe you're like, hey, I'm worth $10 an hour at the table. Maybe you're saying I'm worth 40. And in the long run, it's going to average out, right? And you're like, okay, maybe I was actually worth 25 this whole time, but you're establishing some kind of a pattern as you go versus this tournament, man. Like you can sit there and just like get crushed and crushed and crushed and crushed. And then you hit one and you're like, oh man, now my hourly is through the roof. I feel great. And you're losing, watch it like plummet again. And you really don't know to the point we've had this discussion before where you don't even know in cash necessarily what your true earn rate is until you've put it in for such a large sample size that it would take you years, right? On tournaments, it's like it's so much more extreme. You have no clue where you're at. And so like not having that affirmation of, am I playing a quality game? Like, am I actually a winning player? Because you could just get, I don't want to say get some dumb luck and win, but it does happen. Like guys
or dumb bad luck and lose.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
But they can
it's possible the best tournament player in the world is some guy that played, 20 live tournaments. He didn't cash in any of them, and he just gave up playing in tournaments. He's just like, screw this. This is just stupid.
Sure.
Right? I mean, it's possible.
Yeah. It is, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like I think, Tom, you mentioned before, like Daniel Negreanu, like when he goes to the WSOP and he plays all those tournaments and he's lost like tons of money in the recently at the WSOP and he's one of the best to play the game and and then we're gonna think like, oh no, we're better than that, we're gonna do okay. Like,
well, what did he have last year? He lost wasn't it like 1.1 million or something last year?
Like that. Yeah, I think about $1 million bucks. Yeah.
I followed it last year and I just couldn't believe. I mean, and he's a great, a phenomenal player. But to think like if a guy like that has that kind of variance, like what chance do I stand to come out ahead on a regular basis? So that's nuts. I definitely go ahead.
Well, you're like talking about car crashes, right? Okay, not only do not. Also, the timing of the crash is going to matter so much, right? Because
absolutely,
let's say you run deep in some tournament and you end up coming in 10th, but if it wasn't for like some very unlucky hand, you want to come in, say, second, and that's the difference between like, I don't know, like maybe depending on the tournament, it could be like 5 years worth of income.
Right. Oh, absolutely, right? Absolutely.
Like so you weren't even really that unlucky. It was just like one hand out of all these thousands and thousands of hands that ended up, being the difference between, let's say, breaking even over a 5-year stretch and making like a really good living over a 5-year stretch. Like, I mean, I don't know how people could, like without some kind of baseline income outside of playing in the tournaments, like, I don't know how people could do that.
Yeah, and I think like when it's a side thing where you're just like, hey, I hope I bink this thing and I'm able to put a bunch of money in my wallet, then it's fun and it's exciting and whatever. It's not a big deal. But when you're trying to because people I've known multiple people who have been like, I'm going to play tournaments for a living, and I don't know how you can mentally just stick with that over and over again. Like to me, I could see like, hey, I'm a cash player and I fired this many tournaments per month, 1 per month, 2 per month, whatever, 1 a week.
Right.
They're smaller, whatever. But like to try to think, yeah, I'm just gonna like only play tournaments. It takes a special kind of somebody, because I know I could never do it. I think mentally I would be breaking down just on that like law of large numbers of what it takes to actually figure out where you're at and figure out like to smooth the variance.
Right.
Well, to your point, it's like you have to play so many before you know where you're at. That anyway.
One thing that like also that comes to mind is like with the tournaments. And then with our trip to Vegas is like, I mean, people, it's like, some people would think I'm a great tournament player. Like I'm a great poker player. I'm going to play tournaments. Right. But their insight towards their own abilities, like how insightful are they towards their own abilities? And, we're in Vegas and, you and me talked about this a couple of times. Like when we're, like, at the table, there might be somebody that's like, oh yeah, I play for a living. I play every day. People are like, oh man, these guys, like these tourists are terrible. Like I'm the best. And then they're doing like, sort of strange stuff. And, but that's like, that is the thing that's like incredible about poker is like I think that's probably that might be one of the most important things about poker is like if you have that skill of knowing where you are, how good you actually are. Because if you don't have that, it's a very dangerous game. It's a very, very dangerous game.
Totally is. It feeds your ego, and that's something I appreciate about both of you guys. I think you're really good at assessing where you're at. And just something that impressed me was like, I don't know, I'm too much of a degen to be done after 4 hours. But you're like, all right, it's been 4 hours. I had a winning session. I can tell mentally I should just check out. Like you're very in tune with where you're at, and I'm like, even if I'm a little bit off. Okay, I wanted to ask you guys this question, so I'm gonna just segue this into this question. But there are times, let me use English instead of backwoods hillbilly.
Yep.
There is times where was I?
Yep.
So, but there are times where like I'm at a table, I'm aware that I'm tired. I'm a shift worker, right? So I deal with being tired and brain fog all the time. Very used to it, but I'm also aware that like my brain function is going down, but I'm maybe more in tune with that than the average person because I deal with it on a regular basis. Doesn't make me less vulnerable to brain fog, but just more in tune with it. Meanwhile, there's another guy at my table who's like 2 drinks deep.
Only 2?
Well, sure, right? Like I'm giving you an example.
Okay.
But like, yeah, a lot of the table's drinking, and I'm trying to assess, should I leave the table because I'm starting to get tired?
Right.
And the game is good. And where I found myself multiple times on this trip was like, yes, I'm tired. Yes, that guy's pretty drunk. And I'm trying to figure out like who is more crippled right now? Like who is the weakest wildebeest that's about to like be done, like because the guy that's sitting across from me, this happened in one of the PLO games. I'm like, okay, that guy is like, he is in worse condition than I am. And though I should probably go home soon, I know I know that I have enough of a gap right now on him that this is a profitable situation. But how do you play that spot where you're like, I know I'm compromised, but I'm less compromised than that guy? Because I'm curious, Tom, you have like your chess background in tournaments. I feel like this is something you've dealt with. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, we're playing our opponents one at a time.
So and I should ask, how many of your opponents are drunk in a chess match?
Interesting. Okay, in all the years I played chess, there were at least 2.
Oh, really?
And one of them was a stronger player than me who was clearly drunk, and he crushed me.
Oh, okay. Not the answer I expected. I thought for sure you'd be like 0, naturally 0.
There are a lot of Russians to play chess, and a lot of Russians like vodka.
Okay.
That's all I'm gonna say about that. But
all
yes,
right, that's interesting.
So you're not getting like you're playing a table full of people. So I'm not sure that I would use the metric like, am I better than than a 9-player table? Am I at least the 8th best player at this table? To be the determination as to whether or not I'd stick around.
So here's where I was at. That's funny you say this because we are 8-handed.
Okay.
There are 5 people drinking. I am not one of them. Right. And some of them are on their like 3rd or 4th drink.
Okay. Are they Russians?
They're not Russians. They don't have a secret stash of vodka that they're pulling out. Okay.
Well, I guess if you think you're in the top, even in your compromised state, if you think you're in the top, say 2 or 3 players at the table, right? But it's kind of hard to know, right? Like
it is.
Some people are really like they can drink, and me, if I have a beer, 50% chance I fall asleep. Right? I just would nod off at the table, like all happy, and then I just pass out, right?
Okay.
Other people are gonna have like 6 drinks, and like for them it's just normal.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of depends.
Yeah.
But I would say, if they're doing things that seem like it's really bad, right? If you can identify that people are doing things that are really bad, and you would never do those bad things, even in your state, then I guess you should keep playing if as long as you could stay at the table.
It was a close decision because I was identifying things from like, okay, that's some sloppy play, but I'm like, I know that my ability to think through a spot is diminishing. And so there's like this, I'm like playing with fire a little bit, right? Of like, okay, like I need to stay here because this is profitable, but at what point am I just too exhausted? And luckily for me, I was up, I was doing well, and this guy comes in, sits down, brings like 3 racks of chips over. Clearly, like you could see the focus in his eyes, brings a green tea. You're like, time for me to cash out. We're done. We're done. But I played like two hands with him, and I'm like, nope. This guy's super aggressive. He's alert. He's crushing the game. We're done. We're ready to go. So,
well, I mean, yeah, you have experience being a shift worker, and then you have lots of experience in poker, and a lot of hours put in. So I think that's the difference too, because like I'm with cash games, definitely like relatively newer, not relatively, but much newer, and it's like I have an A game, and then about 4 or 5 hours in, it turns into like we're in D territory, like it goes real quick.
Skip over B and C.
Yeah, it goes real quick, whereas you might have like a little bit slower, drop than I do, but but I do think like when you're tired and I think with chess as well, like when you're tired, your ability to assess how sharp you are is also diminished. So
really
if you think you're playing your B game, well, then you should say I'm playing my C game, or something like that. You need to discount.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about it a ton on this channel, but Tommy Angelo, where he's talking about your A, B, and C game, getting up every hour, evaluating where am I, what game am I playing. But that's a really good point. You do start to kind of lose touch with where you're at. And often it's like you make the mistake and then you go, okay, I was compromised.
Yeah.
Right?
Why did I do that?
Yeah. Rather than being like, I think I'm about to make a mistake.
Yeah, you don't know that. Your brain, when it's tired, is like, it doesn't. And it's hard because like, I mean, like I was saying before, it's at the lodge and there's this insane game and like you never get the chance to sit at a table like this. I may never get a chance again. And how to leave, like how do you leave it? But I think also like it's like I don't know, like I think if my goal was like if I was a professional, it's like I have to make money, then you really can't leave that table. You've got to figure something out. But if you're doing it if your purposes are for fun and enjoyment and not to like make a living, then you can leave. So.
I feel like my tired persona, like my tired alter ego, is always looking to put on a hero cape too. I'll be like, I have 4th pair. He just bet full pot on the turn, and he's got like a 1-to-1 SPR for the river. If I call him down twice, I'm gonna look like a genius. Like that's what my tired brain is trying to convince me to do all the time, and it's so costly. If I allow myself to get there, I'm like, I'm gonna look so smart. Of course, you never do, right? You always punt off a stack and then go, maybe it's time I should leave. But
sharp brain is like logic, reason, discipline. Hold on, don't do anything brash. And then as we get tired, it becomes a lot more artistic.
Yeah, for sure.
Like risky and everything happens. Yeah.
It's like that. It's like that scene from like any of like the James Bond. I think of like the Casino Royale, where they always make the James Bond character where he can like sit at the table. It's funny. I watched the background on it, and they like he like had no idea how to play poker. He was like the least knowledgeable, and they were like desperately trying to get him to understand it. He couldn't do it. But in every James Bond, he's just like sitting at the table looking at people. It doesn't matter what his cards are. He's gonna win because he's such a genius. And I feel like somehow my tired brain is like, that's who I am. I think I'm James Bond. I think I'm winning with any 2 cards here.
Me too. Me too. It's like, and that day I remember I was like, you know what? I'll stay here another hour and a half. I'll probably win like $1,000, and then this game is so good. I'll just do that.
I'll probably just win $1,000. I like that. That's max confidence there.
Well, I sort of think of in poker, like you're trying to do 3 things, right? You've got your sort of away from the table study, where you sort of come up with, like you gather information, come up with a strategy. Then there's the actual play, where you're implementing strategies and changing things on the fly. And then the third thing is making sure that your brain is as functional as possible for as long as possible.
Yeah.
And I kind of think people, now maybe not so much anymore, probably about 30 years ago or so in the chess world, maybe 40, they started realizing like, you couldn't be like smoking at the board and doing whatever, like this was just not good for your play. So, you know what? Chess players didn't take very good care of themselves, like on average. Now the top chess players, I mean, in my opinion, they've never been in better physical shape than they are now. And probably 20 years from now, they'll be in even better physical shape because you just cannot function. I mean, it just seems like poker, like chess, right? It just seems like you're just sitting there doing nothing. But of course, that's not true, right? You're exercising your brain, you're putting your body under a lot of nervous stress for long periods of time.
Yeah.
You know, one decision might affect everything, right? Like you make one bad decision at one point, it's like you've ruined everything that you've built up till then. And so I think people are starting to realize, like, you know, this is kind of important. It might be the most important part, like maybe even more important than the other two parts, just because, you know, if my brain is functioning at 100% and the guy across from me is, you know, hungover and whatever, he might have a lot more knowledge, but can he implement it quickly? Can he, you know, get it out of his brain? Can he stay awake for like these hours, right?
Yeah, and accurately too. Like you can have all the knowledge you want, but if you start getting sloppy. Yeah. There's I'm trying to remember which book it was. It was I think the 100 biggest poker mistakes or something like that. I don't recall the title, but he was talking about, it's really stuck with me. He was talking about you can have your brain, like if you're not sleeping, your brain is functioning on the amount of sleep it's had. And what you can do is you can caffeinate your body to feel alert and awake. Jess, we talked about this a lot, and I'm sure you know, Tom, but like you can caffeinate it to reach this level where you feel alert. It's like, but your brain function doesn't change. It's if you had 6 hours of sleep last night, you can be jittery as all get out, but your brain function is 6 hours of sleep. If you had 2, it's 2. Like there's no tricking it into reaching a higher level of function. And I think that was really good for me because I used to come in and I would be really solid at the beginning of my sessions, play really clean. And then I would use, and he said, especially don't use artificial caffeines. I'd be like, oh, I'm in Vegas. I'll have a Red Bull and stay awake a little longer, which is like the worst thing you can do because it's sugars and artificial caffeines and all these fake stimulants that are not good for your body. And so then your quality of play will like diminish, but you're not really sure why. You feel alert and then you can't sleep right at night because you pumped your body up to try to keep it awake. Then you come the next day and you're on like 4 hours of sleep because you've destroyed your sleep pattern. And now you need more caffeine to stay awake. And it's this like diminishing return over the course of the trip. And so I thought that was really good. Like his chapter really stood out to me. And some of his advice was like green tea with a little bit of honey if you need some caffeine. Give yourself like good fruits and things like that. On the break for the tournament, we run down, we get, you get 10 minutes or whatever, 15 minutes to like grab a snack in the first, I think you played like 4 hours, and then you got a break. And so everybody goes running downstairs and you're trying to just like grab stuff. Well, they've got like bags of potato chips. They've got soda. They've got like everything you're not supposed to eat. And then they have like a $3 banana and like some jerky and like some okay things. And I'm like, all right, I guess this is what I'm eating, like some trail mix and some of that stuff, and try to like have some more balanced. But like there's just so little opportunity during a tournament to eat well. I feel like one of the big advantages would be prepping some food and having it like in a backpack where you can have something healthier along the way.
Right.
How did you guys do that with Go ahead.
Yeah. Europeans, a lot of them use chocolate, but by chocolate, I do not mean North American chocolate. Right? The chocolate we eat in North America is not like the chocolate they eat in Europe. Right? It's, like 90% cocoa and not very sweet by like North American standards. Mm-hmm. Most people would probably find it maybe even slightly better. Okay. But like real chocolate, right? Nuts are pretty common, and bananas are pretty common. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'd say those are probably the 3 most common things you see people eating.
But you say when you were playing, people weren't doing this. So you had like players at the table that eventually had to like throw out their crack pipes and be like, all right, I need to get serious about chess.
Well, there'd be like the first Olympiad I played in, like I played in 4 of them, and the one in 1988, they allowed smoking at the tables. Probably, I would guess like maybe 20 to 30%. I mean, a lot of Eastern Europeans, right?
Sure.
A lot of Asians, a lot of those guys smoke.
Yeah.
Right. the Canadian team, there's maybe like 2 smokers out of the 6 of us.
Hmm.
But like a lot of teams, every single person was a smoker. Like people were just not in good shape compared to players nowadays. Nowadays, like people think chess players are, like, but I mean, take a look at like Magnus Carlsen. Like that guy can be soccer player. He could do anything. Like,
Sure.
he's not going to be in the Olympics or anything, but he's in good shape for a guy, like a guy his age, 33, I think he is.
Yeah.
You just can't like if you're just a tub sitting around, like your brain is just not going to function very well. So like I was telling Jess, you got to improve his endurance. Then he can sit maybe a little bit longer and be able to have his A game for hour 5, 6, and 7.
What's your plan, Jess? How are you going to get in peak physical condition, best shape of your life? What are you going to do?
Well, and like I think with poker, and I think with like all things, there's this performative aspect. I mean, it's a performance and what you can provide in that moment. Like, like think about myself when I go to work and how I'm functioning at that 9 a.m. visit and how I'm functioning at that 3 p.m. visit. And these things can change, and how people function like after lunch. Like it's like what you can provide in that moment, like in that moment where you're at. Because so I think, I mean, I'm very excited about this component of things, because I feel like I've mentioned this quite a bit here on this with you guys, but it's like, why am I here? What am I doing here playing poker? What is the point of this? But I mean, I think that's why I like this. Like, okay, well, maybe this is something that's like can be healthy or can drive me to be like a better person and
Sure.
take better care of myself. And it is motivating, like, so so before I went to the World Series, I tried this F45 like interval training, and it's like cardio and it's like a 45-minute session, and there's like, I don't know, here then across the country there's like these groups, and so I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll do that regularly and get some like good cardio in. I think to me it's more of like the exercise component, I think, is what's lacking. So I would like to have like a good regimen of that, which I think has already gotten better than what it was.
Any chance you're going to train for, like, we were watching some American Gladiator highlights the other night, something like that, where you like have to go out and battle with the stick or whatever it's called and try to knock somebody else off you got to get that kind of training going, get yourself the best shape of your life, then play some poker.
Maybe the 3 of us, for our New Year's resolution, we'll start something, and then at the end of the year, we'll all get together in that gladiator circle.
Yes.
And we'll go for it.
That's it. Tom Smash. Smash.
Right on. All right, fellas. Well, I'm gonna wrap this thing up. Thanks for hanging out, Jess. It's getting dark there. It must be nighttime. The sun's going down in your room, so we're gonna let you go before it's completely black there. But good talking with you guys. Thanks for hanging out, and thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good week. Talk to you next time.
Bye, folks.